Good morning and welcome to the Mark MacDonald Zoom call about how to make sure that your discipleship communications don't get stuck as you try to make disciples in your local context. Thank you for being here. There are if you're just getting here, there should be in the chat a place for you to download the content that Mark's about to deliver. And we're excited about this. Mark is a longtime friend of First Coast Churches. The story behind me, First Coast Churches, is a partnership that we worked with Mark, and so we are super excited to have a trusted friend talking to us about this very important subject. And so, Mark, the next 60 minutes is yours. Thank you for being here.
That's awesome. Thank you, Bob. And it's interesting because I realize the trust factor that Bob has in me to be able to talk to you all. And I love Bob and I love everything that First Coast Churches have been doing. And I'm cheering everybody on from afar and as close as I possibly can. So thank you, Bob, for letting me do this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's interesting because and just so you know, if you just joined, I think I have to repost it, but in the chat there is a link. Just make sure that you choose the FCC webinar when you get to that form, and you can download the notes. Because of the way that we're doing this as a webinar, it's not necessarily the slides. It's kind of like a really nice, tight, two-page PDF that just kind of walks you through the steps that we're going to talk about today. And probably will have a little bit more than what we're going to be able to handle in the next 55 minutes. So I want to honor your time. Thank you all for being here. I get to travel a lot, and maybe some of you do as well. And a couple of weeks ago, I was walking through an airport, as I oftentimes do, and I noticed people were just standing perfectly still on a moving sidewalk. I mean, have you ever noticed that? I mean, some people step onto the walkway and they just stand there. They let the sidewalk do all the work. They're moving, but barely. They're making progress, but it's really slow. And then there's those other people like me. I see a moving sidewalk and I see it as an opportunity. I step on and I make sure that I keep walking when I get onto that sidewalk. Why? Because you can actually move faster. And I look at the people who are standing still and those who are just like racing by. Uh, we're all headed in the same direction, but um, we're all making the most of a path that's been provided to us. And it made me wonder, nobody gets on a moving sidewalk hoping to stay where they are. Everybody steps on because they want to actually go someplace. And I don't know how you feel about this, but I think church is a lot like that moving sidewalk. Very few people walk through our church doors thinking, I hope I'm in exactly the same place spiritually a year from now. They come because something in their life needs hope or healing or purpose or forgiveness, or maybe it's community. Or here's a big one: what if they want their marriage to be stronger, or maybe become a better parent? You know, maybe, and this is where we as pastors oftentimes we go to, maybe they just want to know God more deeply. Um, but ultimately, they want something different than the life that they're living today. In other words, they already want to move. Our job isn't to convince them that growth matters. Our job is to show them that path. because here's what I've learned after working with churches for decades. If the path isn't obvious, people stand still. And I mean, getting back to the moving sidewalk thing, like imagine if somebody knew that they had to get to their gate and they didn't know enough to get onto that moving sidewalk. They just stand still. And ultimately, um, people don't always know what that next step is. And that's why discipleship matters. That's why communicating a discipleship path may be one of the most important leadership responsibilities that you have as a pastor. Today, we're going to, in 1 hour, try to reveal why discipleship does matter, and then how do you create a path? And thank you for investing the time into something that's this important. I mean, the fact that you signed up tells me that you care deeply about helping people grow spiritually and not just attending services. If I were to ask you all in one really short sentence, what's the hardest part about discipleship in your church? Instantly, your mind probably races to a lot of things. But what is the hardest part about discipleship in your church? Y- You know what we were just talking about. I mean, I believe that most people do things to get a benefit from them. Most people attend church because they want to improve something or get something or gain something or go someplace. And I think that it's is where the church oftentimes drops the ball, where they want to do something or get something and we don't deliver. Discipleship, I think we all know. And when Bob and I started talking about this, you know, what is it that the church needs? I hear this all the time from pastors that discipleship, why can't we get more people into discipleship? And, Mac Lake once said, discipleship is a lifestyle. Discipleship is not a program. And the problem that I oftentimes have when it comes to talking about discipleship, we all reach out to, you know what, if only I had a better program, or if I only was able to communicate a program better to my people, they would all jump on board. See, most churches don't have a passion problem around discipleship. I mean, you all want it. Instead, I believe that it's a clarity problem. You know, people there's a lot of little side roads that I'd like to go down, and I do listening groups for a lot of churches. I've done hundreds of them, and I get to, the church trusts me enough to sit with a group of people from their church, and they get me to ask them some questions. And what I've found is when discipleship comes up, the group gets very quiet. I oftentimes I believe that most people in our churches, when given this crazy term discipleship, I think that a lot of people have a big question mark. And that's the clarity problem that I believe that most of our churches are dealing with. People don't resist discipleship. They resist confusion. If they don't understand what discipleship is all about, how do we expect them to go down a path? Interestingly, so I get to write a lot of articles. I just had my 1,000th magazine article published, and one of the places that I get to write for is Lifeway Research. And Lifeway Research contacted me and they said, "Okay, so we have some data that we want to talk about and we want to present to our pastors, and it's very revealing. But how do we take it from what the research says to what the church should be doing? Well, according to Lifeway research, many churches are experiencing discipleship confusion, even with the best of intentions. So the data, and if you downloaded if you went to the chat, it's just be known for something.com/subscribe, and you choose FCC webinar and you downloaded that, I give you a link to the original Lifeway article that talks about the data. Um, just to sum it up really quickly, 52% say that they have an intentional plan for discipling individuals. Yes, just pat ourselves on the back. 52%. So only half of our churches, crazy enough, don't understand the importance of discipling individuals. That's just crazy to me. But what's even crazier is that 52% intentional plan intentional plan for discipling individuals, but only 7% strongly agree that it's actually effective. Like, isn't that crazy? It's like, why are we doing something if we don't think it's effective? So let's just let's just discuss this today. I mean, so Lifeway Research tried to clearly define discipleship. Now, this is from their vantage point, and it's from talking to a lot of pastors. Would the average person coming to our church understand these things? Probably not. And that's where it comes to a leadership issue where you have to start educating your people. If you're here today and you want to get here, here are some of the steps that you need to take. Now, according to Lifeway Research, they identified 8 signposts, what they call signposts of spiritual maturity. So if you're thinking, okay, so the average person's here and we want them through discipleship to become more spiritually mature, the things that they describe as their signposts is Bible engagement, denying self, serving others, sharing Christ, exercising faith, seeking God, building relationships, and living unashamed. I dare say that if you ask the people in your pews what the signposts of spiritual maturity, they would not come up with those 8. But I digress. So interestingly, though, the lowest score on that, like when they asked pastors, okay, so if we have these 8 signposts of spiritual maturity, what what do you think is lived up to the most? The lowest score was sharing Christ, and that got a score of around 55%. Um, and then when they took the overall average discipleship score across key areas of spiritual growth, it was only 68% out of 100. So 68 out of 100. What we have to understand as pastors is that attendance does not automatically equal discipleship. Oftentimes, it's like showing up at the airport, knowing you need to get to the gate, but not knowing how to get there. So, if we were to ask you all, because you all look so much smarter than the people that Lifeway probably talked to, maybe you guys were in that, I don't know. Would you say that you currently have a clearly defined discipleship path? Knowing what Lifeway says, they're saying that half of you would. Should I? And I'm not even going to call you out. So, what we have to understand is that, and then what was it? 7% said that they were actually effective. So, do you have a plan and is it effective? if you have a plan and it's not effective, it's like having no plan at all. Even churches with plans, oftentimes, according to what I hear back from pastors, they have a struggle about communicating them. And again, I think it might go back to the definition of what does it mean to, want somebody on a discipleship path. I've talked to a lot of different groups in those listening groups when I bring up discipleship. Oftentimes, when they get quiet, they oftentimes say, "So, what does that actually mean?" And whether you call this a discipleship path or not, I would just encourage you to understand what they understand, not what you understand. You might say, yes, we need a discipleship plan. I listen to Mark MacDonald, and this is what we're going to do for a discipleship plan. You'll understand what discipleship plan is, but they won't understand it. You need to communicate it in such a way so that they understand that it's movement in their spiritual life towards a goal. Now, there's lots of reasons. There's probably 5 reasons why church discipleship plans actually stall, though. Uh, and and some of this you're going to go, that's probably what's happening in my church. But number one, they're just too complicated. What I've learned in my life, especially in communication, if if you make anything complicated, people will just ignore it. And I'll tell you, I mean, I know this happens because if I send a long email, like 8 or 9 sentences long, I know that the average person that I send those emails to will not read all of them because it's just a little too much for them. Our lives are so full of complication that most people see complication as noise. If your discipleship plan is complicated, people are ignoring it. Number two is that you're using insider language. And again, that gets back to that whole idea of if you put discipleship in it and they're not quite sure what discipleship is, in that confusion, they will just ignore it. So make sure that you're voicing it in their language. Three, they're um, you're not communicating it consistently. So oftentimes, what ends up happening is whatever you've worked on, that week or even that month or that quarter, and you think, yes, everybody needs to get on this discipleship path, and then you just communicate it, and then it just drops off. This comes to light in a lot of communication issues. I mean, I'll sometimes say to a pastor, so do you tell them to download your app? Or do you tell them that you go to the website? And they all say the same thing. We do. And when we got our new app, we got everyone to download it. But the problem is that it's out of sight, out of mind. If you don't communicate it regularly and consistently, they will forget about it. Just like you all as pastors forget about a lot of things. 4. So one, they're too complicated. 2, they're using insider language. 3, they're communicated inconsistently. And then 4, people don't know what that next step is. And we've all been there. Like those times that you are researching something and oh yeah, I gotta fix this. And it's like, okay, I need to know all those steps in between. Why? Because I don't know how even to go to that next step. Everybody is the exact same thing. They want to be spoon fed. What's the next step? And then what's the next step? And then what's the next step? So lastly, 5, churches measure attendance more than transformation. I mean, churches oftentimes, when I'll ask a pastor, so how's your church? They'll oftentimes go to attendance. Why? Because it's the easiest thing, but it's discipleship that will cause transformation in your church. If I stopped somebody, like if I did a secret shopper, what I get to do with a lot of churches, if I show up at your door and I walk into the lobby of your church or the foyer, and I stop somebody in your lobby and I just ask the simple question, so how do people grow spiritually here? Would they know how to answer? And if they don't know how to answer, or if there's a hesitation, then they don't know. That question just changes everything when it comes to discipleship. So, how do we create something that will be repeated quite easily by the people in your church? So, I believe, and I call it the clear framework. Now, let me just share my screen here so that you can have something to look at other than my mug. Um, so the clear framework, CLEAR, again, 5 things. So, first of all, you need to clarify the destination. So, what does spiritual maturity actually look like in your church? How does it actually look like in an individual who goes to your church? One thing I've learned, and I've said it earlier in this talk, is that confused people just don't move. They like to stay where they're at. So if you think that the people in your pews are just enjoying where they're at, that's probably because you don't have a clear destination that you're trying to move them to, or a destination that they would want to go to. Number two, L, label the steps simply. This sounds easy. And oftentimes churches just rip off other churches of, what are they doing? Well, yes, that's what we want to do too. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a second. It That's better than nothing. But what if you made those steps so that it actually fits what your church is all about? What we call your be known for something statement, what we call the thread. Like if you have a thread for your church, those steps should align with that thread. Remember that memorable language will always win. So do whatever it takes. That's why I made this a clear framework so that you can remember the CLEAR. So, number one, clarify. Number two, label the steps simply. If your discipleship plan cannot be repeated, it will not spread. That's the end of that. If your discipleship plan cannot be repeated, it cannot spread. So, E, explain it repeatedly. We're an awful dense people, and I'm talking about us that are on this Zoom right now. I mean, everybody is dense today. If you're not reminded on a regular basis, it will be out of sight, out of mind. Explain it repeatedly. If it matters, repeat it. And that's what I've found. Oftentimes, the pastor will say, "Oh man, discipleship is very important here." And then maybe they mention it once or
Okay, one more
twice
thing for you.
a
Yeah. Okay.
year. Oh, somebody just unmuted. Um, so CLE, the A is align every ministry. So, just like a good thread that you want to become known for in a church, all of your ministries need to align underneath of that thread. When it comes to discipleship, you need to align your kids programming, students, groups, missions, adults, like everything needs to align under this. Every person who enters your church doors, whether it's from the very first time to the longtime member, no matter what ministry they're on, they need to align to your discipleship framework. So ultimately, that usually means that it needs to be clear and it needs to connect. So on the sheet that hopefully you've downloaded, um, it actually it says, so if somebody's a brand new guest when they arrive, how do they get onto the discipleship path? If somebody is, what's another one that we have here? What if they're finally ready to serve? Then how do they jump onto the discipleship pathway? So the more that you can help them understand where they're at and where they need to move to, the better. And one of our formulas here at Be Known for Something is, how do you get somebody's attention? Well, you say their name, speak their pain, solutions to proclaim, and then show the gain. So if you want to get their attention, you say their name. Hey, are you a young uh young adult who is trying to raise kids and you don't feel like you know what you're doing? That's saying their name and then speaking their pain. And then if you can say, here's what we have to offer as a church that can help you get to where you want to be. That's, once you say their name, speak their pain, solutions to proclaim, they'll lean into that solution and say, you know what, that's really good. But then you need to show their gain. So if you actually take part in this solution, I'd like you to hear from somebody who has gone through this process and what it's done for them. That's more powerful. That's why the power of the testimony is so huge in our church. Show their gain. Is it worth doing? Yes. And I'm not going to tell you that it's worth doing because I came up with it. Instead, it's somebody who's gone through it, somebody who's where you're at has moved through this process. So we need to make sure that in the discipleship pathway, if we're getting people to move from here to here, we have people who testify that, you know what, once I was here, but now I've moved through the steps, and this is how it's benefited my life. So all of that needs to make sure that it aligns with wherever somebody arrives at your church and whatever their pain point is at your church. And then finally, the R, go figure, reinforce the next steps constantly. People need guidance. They don't, and I oftentimes see it at the airport. Somebody will come along, like one of those, young kids, and they'll be toddlers and they're holding somebody's hand and they get to this crazy looking contraption that looks like they're just going to get sucked down the middle of the walkway, and you can see the apprehensiveness and the parent who says, no, just step just the regular way, and they show them the next step, and then you can almost see the delight in their eyes, like, look what I just did. And that's what we just need to see the delight in other people's eyes when we walk them through the next steps. Clarity will always create movement. The moment that you clearly tell somebody what that next step is and they want to move and they take that next step, that movement will create more movement along the way. So that's the clear framework. That sounds a lot easier than what it is, I realize. But what we need to do is we need to take a step back and think, imagine, and maybe on a piece of paper near you right now or on your computer, I want you to start writing a disciple at my church, our church, is someone who, and then finish that sentence. A disciple at our church is someone who, and and you all could have totally different answers to that. But once you write that, the big question is, could your congregations say the same thing? Do they know what you know? And oftentimes, I think that's where the disconnect, and that's why Lifeway research has showed that there's a disconnect between a church who creates a path and that it's not all that successful. If it's a great path and you know that a person will be better off because of that path, you need to communicate it and do it on a consistent basis. So I call it the rollout strategy. So what is the rollout strategy? How do you actually communicate it? Remember, your church does not need more complexity. It needs more clarity, more simplification. Simplicity will always be clearer. So, what if you just took, I don't know, it's near the end of July and I know that this is evergreen. So wherever you are right now on the calendar, if you think, how can I improve discipleship over the next 30 days? Let's just break it into 4 weeks. So remember, you don't need another ministry. So don't create the discipleship ministry. Instead, you need a clearer path. You need to make sure that people know that next step. So, in the next 30 days, do these four things, and I will guarantee you that your church will be communicating discipleship more clearly than probably 90% of churches. Are, are you ready? Are you going to jump onto this? So, let me just share my screen again. The rollout. And here we go. So, discipleship rollout. Here's a strategy that you can do in 4 weeks. So, number one, clarify your destination. If you can't explain it, your church will never experience it. That's how easy it is. If you can't explain it, your church can't experience it. This is the leadership work that you need to do. You need to make sure that you say their names, speak their pain, solutions to proclaim, and then show their gain. You need to make sure that you can explain it. Where clarify the destination you believe that they need to be there, and what we call here poking the pain. So if somebody's here and they know that they need to be here, say it's I'm wherever I am right now, wherever you are, and I decide I'm really hungry. I need to go to a local restaurant. Well, you're probably going to have to get into a car or whatever that first step is. But if I want to encourage you to get to the restaurant, I need to say, are you hungry? And talk about hunger. And you know what? Sometimes the hunger it just gets too much for me and poke the pain, like let them know that where they're at is not a good thing, and then clarify the destination. We're going to meet here together and we're going to do these steps together. So how do we do that? So gather all of your key leaders for, I don't know, a 1 hour meeting, whatever your church is used to. And I want you to answer four questions. So here are the four questions. What does spiritual maturity actually look like at our church? What does spiritual maturity actually look like at our church? Number two, what are the 3 to 5 steps that someone needs to take to get there? So, what are the 3 to 5 steps that people would actually take to get there? And again, I'm just going to tell you, more people will remember 3 steps than they'll remember 5 steps. And the goal here is for them to be able to say it. So, I know I look at all of you all and you're a whole lot smarter than I am. And you will come up with 5. What if we had 7 steps? Oh my goodness, what if we had 10 steps? Everybody, no, like get it as short as possible. So either 3 steps or 5 steps. And or 4 steps. I, but odd actually in communications, odd things resonate better than even things. Not sure why, but that's just the case. Okay, so what does spiritual maturity actually look like here? What are the 3 to 5 steps that somebody takes to get there? Number 4 is, what words would a first time guest actually understand? We're not looking for spiritually mature people to try to achieve spiritual maturity. We're looking for immature people, people who are first time guests, people who have just arrived. What words would they be using, and what words would they understand? And then finally, what are we going to ask people to do next? What are we asking people to do next? There it is. That lock your key leadership in a room for 60 minutes. Might take 90 minutes, but 60 or whatever your church is used to, and have them answer those 4 questions. Don't leave until every leader can explain your discipleship path in less than 30 seconds. If they can't do it in 30 seconds, it will not be communicated later. So here's another thing that you could write down right now. So it's just a very simple sentence. At our church, we help people dot, dot, dot. If you can't finish that sentence simply, just keep working. Before you all leave that room, you need to be able to explain that. Confusion is very expensive to our churches. Clarity will always create movement. If you think you're stagnating, it's probably because you need to lean into clarity a little bit more. Okay, so that's week 1. Simple, right? I know it's always easier to preach it than it is to actually live it, but I digress. Week 2, simplify the path and language. So we need to, I know that you're going to be able to expand and unpack all of those simple things, but say less, they'll repeat more. Always the case. Most churches communicate too much. Instead, we need to simplify. So take every ministry brochure, every web page, every announcement, every, I don't know, membership class, and ask, does this support our discipleship pathway? If spiritual maturity is the goal of the church, which I believe it is, then everything that we do needs to revolve around our discipleship path. And then the crazy thing is, or does this just distract from it? Anything that doesn't support it either gets rewritten or removed. Imagine churches removing something from our calendar, but I digress. So now, in order for, once you have that simple path and language, then let's go with 4 this time. So I would say let's create 4 communication tools. So number 1, have a 1-pager discipleship roadmap. No paragraphs on it, just a simple visual. Now, I've worked with a lot of churches who decide at that stage, whatever that roadmap looks like, let's put it into a place that people will see it, maybe on a wall or in the foyer, so that anybody who wonders, I wonder how I can grow spiritually, they can quickly go to that roadmap. Just remember that if you have to download it, or if you have to print it, or you have to find it printed, it's going to be difficult to do. So you just want to create something simple and visual. Number two, then create a web page. Yes, create a web page. The people do, it's like back in the day, we used to get the printed bulletin, and then uh, throughout the week go, where did I put the bulletin? Well, that's why websites are so great. You can pick up your phone and get to a website really fast. So call the web page something that would speak to a pain or a solution, like how do I grow here? Don't make it fancy, don't make it clever. Just answer that question. And if you answer the question that the average person might have, Google will love you, and ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, Gemini, whatever your AI, if someone's asking them that question, they will they will go to the answer with path of least resistance. So that use the actual language. And then number three, create a slide, just one slide, and then somehow work it into every Sunday for a while. Maybe it's every other Sunday after a while, but make sure you keep coming back to it and make sure that you show that discipleship path. If it's the most important thing that we do as a church is to create spiritual maturity, then it should probably be mentioned, I would say, every week. And then four, create maybe a takeaway, whether that's a sticker or a wallet size version, or maybe it's a phone wallpaper, something that people can actually remember. And if you have an app, work it into the app so that people can see what it takes to move to the next step. Remember, people don't follow complexity. They will always follow clarity. Okay, so number three, and I repeated it enough? You need to repeat it. Repeat and use those visuals and the next steps. The vision leaks unless you keep pouring. Remember, we're cracked pots, right? The vision leaks unless you keep pouring. Most pastors announce something once and then they stop. But leaders, true leaders, will repeat it until it becomes your church's culture. And you need to bake this into your church's culture. So this week, maybe mention the pathway in the sermon. This is week 3, remember? So you've come through 1, 2, and 3. So on this week, maybe mention it in the sermon, and then maybe work it into your sermon for a regular basis. Mention it in the announcements, mention it in staff meetings, mention it in deacons meeting, in volunteer huddles, in new membership classes, yay, in small groups, and just repeat, repeat, repeat. So what you need to do is ask your ministry leaders, how does your ministry move people one step further down our path? If they can't answer that, I would question whether that ministry is important. If it's not important enough to build, it's important enough to repeat. If it's important enough to build, it's important enough to repeat. Okay, so week 4, we're almost through. Measure movement, not attendance. Celebrate the stories. So oftentimes what we do is we count people but we don't count progress. We've got to make sure that we're leaning into the progress that the people are doing. So ask how many people, because we like to count. So, how many people took a next step? What about joining a group, starting serving, sharing their faith, inviting someone, were baptized, became mentors, whatever it is? And then remember, say their name, speak their pain, solutions to proclaim, and then share their gain. Celebrate stories every Sunday. If this is important to your church, you need to celebrate stories of how people have moved forward. It might not be to the end, but they've worked progress. Celebrate that progress. Don't just celebrate attendance. When we when we celebrate transformation, people will long for that transformation. Numbers count people. Remember, stories count changed lives. Numbers count people, stories count changed lives. Okay, so then the final step. Imagine if every person in your church could answer two questions. Okay, it's just two questions. How do I grow here? And then the second question is, what's my next step? If they can't answer those questions, that's not a discipleship problem. It's a communications problem. And fortunately, communication problems can be solved. The solution is this week, start clarifying it. You know, I started by talking about the that moving sidewalk at the airport. The funny thing is that nobody gets on hoping to stand still. They step on because they want to get someplace. Some people might stand, others might walk. I've even seen people run on those things, but everyone has a destination in mind. That's true of the people that God has entrusted to your church, to you. I mean, whether it's the single mom that was looking for hope, the young couple trying to build a stronger marriage, the teenager asking big questions about faith, or the retiree looking for purpose in a whole new season. They didn't come because they want to stay where they are. They came because they're looking for something better. I've said it many times on my social media. People aren't looking for a better sermon. They're looking for a better solution. They're looking for Jesus and a path to somewhere better. As pastors, our calling isn't to down, push people down the path. You don't just, you know, push people onto this path. It's actually just to make the path so clear that taking the next step becomes the most obvious thing to do. See, when your church discipleship path is clear, people don't have to wonder, I wonder what I should do next. They already know with clarity. So this week, don't try to create 100 new ideas. Just make the next step clearer, because when the path is clear, people will move to it. And when people move, more people become like Christ. And that's why this matters. Not because you're trying to build a better process. No one wants another process. It's because you're just simply helping people become better disciples. Now, last thing, and I would just be so remiss if I did not end this way, but be known for something. Be known as the church where no one has to wonder how to grow. Just make that next step clearer. Bob, do you want to do
Well,
some Q&As?
yeah, let's I show about 10 more minutes of time that we have. So any questions that are manageable so that a couple people can ask questions?
Yeah, you can either turn your mic on and ask, or you can throw something into the chat.
I've got a quick one. How do you, on the discipleship pathway, balance like personal spiritual disciplines versus kind of the corporate disciplines? Like what happens inside the church versus outside the church?
Yeah, great question. And anytime that I get a question like that, I don't think about necessarily what you would think. I would
Okay.
think, what are they thinking?
Okay.
And most times, and I know that, we all know that one person who would die for their local church, but the average person that's coming to your church is looking in it, what's in it for me.
Hmm.
So I would lean in to a personal destination, like where they individually would want to go. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, sort of. I guess the like what's more forming them on the pathway? Is it going to be more of the church-wide kind of programs or more stuff that they need to independently do? What do you kind of find success?
I oftentimes feel that most people, the more you that's why we say their name, speak their
Yep.
pain, not your church's pain. Because the moment that you say, you know what, this will make it easier for our church, they don't care. It's what's going to make it easier for them. And if you get them on a spiritual journey, a personal spiritual journey where they're maturing in their faith, your corporate issues probably will fade a little bit.
Okay. Thank you.
Somebody else? So Paul Scott asked in the chat, when you promote corporately, how do you get people to move privately?
And
Yeah,
again,
the
I think that
question is this, Mark. So if we do all those steps, we do the 4 weeks, and we do all this corporately, we show slides, we have a table in the lobby, all this, we tell them exactly where to go, we send them chats. What happens when people don't respond? I mean, have you seen a personal way to implement this so that we can get a response from people to see where they're at?
yeah, and uh on the download, we talk about how are you going to measure this? Like how your church needs to figure out a reasonable way to measure this without adding a lot of complexity. I would, the biggest issue that I oftentimes have, and a lot of pastors confide in me, we've tried this, but it has not worked. That usually means your messaging's wrong. And usually you haven't poked the pain enough. You haven't said, "Oh my goodness, aren't you hungry? Are you like, oh, I haven't eaten for whatever," and it's like, let's go to a restaurant. Well, the more you can put in their minds that they do have an issue, this is the hardest thing about this is trying to figure out, so what is their pain point if they want to move to the destination? And that's why I would say start with either the destination or start with their pain points and start talking through. So what is it that is an issue in their life? And oftentimes it maybe might not even be a truly spiritual issue, but along the way to the destination of solving that more secular issue, then you need to implement, here's how the spiritual disciplines will actually help you do that. But then it's the repetition of it all. And you've got to repeat it in such a way so that it feels new, fresh, and different. That's why testimonies are so great, is to get other people to share so that it doesn't feel like it's just a corporate thing, that all they want. Because what I hear in listening groups oftentimes is I'll say, "So what do you think your church is known for?" And then they go, "Oh yeah, what is it that the pastor always says?" It's not what we are, it's what has been said. And that's where the repetition will create culture. So you need to get this to a point where every person who ever attends your church, visits your church, or becomes a member of your church knows you're now on a moving sidewalk, and we want to make sure that we help you down that moving sidewalk so that you can achieve something that you don't have right now, and use testimonies to be able to identify how they might be feeling now, and how that your discipleship path will actually move them down the path.
Well, in the spirit of honoring the time and being done at 11, let me make just a couple of statements. I have um, I've heard Mark several times. I have worked with him. Uh, First Coast Churches and what we do here is largely our discipleship path for pastors. And I can say, as one of the things that I had to learn early on is that this clarity model, this clear model, you got to trust it. I mean, when you behave it, God honors it. People begin to move. It's much easier for us now to say something and get 30 or 40 people or 120 people at a where we are. One of the things we like to say that Trey just put in the chat is that clarity is kindness. So be as clear as you can about everything you do. My research has shown that about 15 to 20% of the people on this screen can take what Mark just did and do what he just said. Like you're the kind of person who your mind works in such a way that you can call this meeting in 2 weeks and you can roll it out. There's about another 30% of you, 35% of you that could use some help. I want to talk to you for just, I want to say to you that are the 20%, go for it. Take it and use it. Tell us how it went. Celebrate with us. But for those of you who need somebody to come along and help facilitate that, or at least have a lunch with you and talk to you about it, we have Darren and I, Jimbo. We can do that. We want to do that. There's actually a process that we're going to be starting this fall called the Dream Disciple Accelerator, and it's a partnership that we have with Clarity House that embodies nearly everything that Mark just said. But it's a way to take steps with a group of people. I'm doing it right now with Refuge Church, just started Monday night. We're taking 6 people through it. I'm working tomorrow with Joey Prusetti at Gather Church. We'll do a micro version for that. So if that's something you're interested in as a church, reach out to me, Bob at First Coast Churches, and or Darren at firstcoastchurches.com, and let us know. We'll be glad to walk with you through that. I am personally um, grateful that you would take the time to be on here. I hope you find it helpful. I would also say to you, if there's anything we can do outside of disciple making that could help your church, we want to be the place where you find trusted people, trusted relationships, and helpful resources. All this will be posted next week on Monday, and so you can listen to it again, take the notes again if you need to. Maybe you wish somebody was with you from your church, maybe a volunteer that's over this. Uh, Try something, take a step, and then let us know how it went. I'm going to pray as a way of closing this, and then we'll see you at another time down the road. But thank you for being here, Father. Thank you for today. Thank you for Mark. God, I pray that you'll continue to give him clarity as he really does help a lot of churches think about their disciple making process. Father, help us as people of the word to be able to love the word enough to actually be like Jesus and talk in the language of the people that we are serving so that they understand it. And so just like he said, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. Those guys understood that. So Father, help us to be the people who can speak sentences like that with clarity so people know what we're about and what their next step is. Father, we love you. Thank you for this time. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.